What's up and welcome to my camera comparison between the Note 9 and the iPhone XS Max. We'll have an audio symbol in the top corner to let you know which phone we're actually capturing the audio from and delivering it to you so you can hear the difference in the mics. This video is currently being recorded at 4K 30 frames per second, but you can also see the frame rate and resolution that we're shooting at in the top corner as we switch between different resolutions and sizes. We're going to be fully testing these cameras out. We're going to look at photos, we're going to look at HDR, we're going to look at portrait mode, we're going to look at low light, and of course we're going to look at the video mode like we're doing right now. And of course I would love to hear your opinion on which of these two devices has a better camera. Let me know in the comments down below. Let's go ahead and get this camera comparison review started right now. Beyond just looking at photos and videos from these cameras, how do they line up on paper? Both smartphones feature 12 megapixel sensors on the back, one wide angle and one telephoto. The main camera on both camera features the same sensor pixel size at 1.4 microns, which is really good for a smartphone camera. It's a nice balance having a 12 megapixel sensor with that large of a pixel size. Yes, there have been some smartphone cameras in the past with 2 microns, and there's been other smartphones with closer to 1, but I think the right balance is 1.4 for a good all-around camera experience. Now, the main difference you're going to see just purely reflected in specs is the difference in apertures between these two devices. The Note 9 features an f1.5 to 2.4 variable aperture. The main thing here is that it's a f1.5, which is going to allow for better natural true bokeh for up-close portraits and macro shots. Now, the iPhone XS has an aperture of f1.8, which is solid, but is nothing amazing really. It's about average for most smartphones. The main difference here is f1.5 versus f1.8 allows for up to 50% more light in when you're taking low light photos, which is a huge advantage for the Note 9. On the front, the Note 9 has an 8 megapixel camera, while the iPhone XS Max has a 7 megapixel front camera sensor. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that the front camera is a lot wider on the Note 9, which I really like. Allows for a lot more versatility, allows for more people to get into your photo if you're doing a selfie camera. It's a very handy feature to have in a front camera. To start with, let's go ahead and say hello to Louie over here. Hey, bud. Now, this is a pretty well-lit room. Not super bright, but fairly bright. Hi, dude. You're going to be in this camera comparison. Yes. All right, so we're going to go downstairs. We're not going to turn the lights on. This will give you an idea of super low-light video. As we get down in here, you're going to see it gets really, really dark downstairs. As you can see, neither of these cameras do particularly well in super low light. With the flashlight on, though, the iPhone XS Max is pretty solid, but I gotta say the Note 9 looks a little bit more crisp due to its sharpening that it has in the video. Taking a look at this extremely low light photo, I gotta say the Note 9 did a better overall job maintaining my skin tones. The overall detail between these two phones is very similar. I will say that the Note 9 just has a lot better colors when it comes to super low light. Now, this is a photo with the flash on, and the Note 9 here definitely has a lot of red eye in the middle of the image, and that's a really, really annoying thing to have to get rid of. Overall, these two flash images are solid for both of these phones. I will say the main glaring issue with the Note 9 is the red eye there. Happens in a lot of these flash photos with the Note 9, so you have to keep that in mind, and you might have to do a little post-processing to remove it if it bothers you, which it probably should because it's pretty bad. As you can see, the detail of these two flash photos, it's nearly identical. The main two differences is how it handles skin tone. I think the iPhone XS Max handled the skin tone a little bit better, and it didn't overexpose the image at all, where on the Note 9 we're getting some little elements that are overexposed, and of course we have the red eye effect in the eyes as well. Now, here's a very low light photo of our pool table. The Note 9 once again handles the colors so much better. They're much more vibrant, much more realistic to what they looked like in real life, where on the iPhone XS Max the low light just really doesn't pop well. The colors don't come out that well. Here's an issue where the sensor on the XS Max is just not getting as much light as it is on the Note 9 because the Note 9 has that lower aperture. As far as details in the image go, it is very similar between both of these photos. It's mainly just the colors that the Note 9 just does so much better. There's also less visible noise in the Note 9, especially if you look at the sections of the blue pool table. You can really see that the Note 9 handles that noise so much better. And here we have some low light video, and I gotta say the actual video mode looks a little bit better on the XS Max, which is really interesting because the photos were so much better on the Note 9. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the backyard. Again, we are shooting at 1080p, 30 frames per second. There should be a good bit of dynamic range on the iPhone XS Max in this bright environment. And it'll also be interesting to see how the exposure handles it on each of these devices, because is it doing face detection, is it exposing specifically for my face, or is it doing an overall image exposing? It'll be very interesting to find out. It's time to take a look at some photos here in the backyard. Here's a photo of this bird statue, and the colors are actually very similar, though the Note 9 might just be a tiny bit more saturated, especially in the greens. But when you take a closer look at the details of the photo, you can see that the Note 9 is actually quite a bit clearer in this particular photo. Not sure if that's because of shutter blur or because of how the iPhone XS Max was processing this image, but we definitely have a much more detailed, clear picture from the Note 9 this time. These photos look nearly identical. I would not be able to tell which camera took this photo in a blind test. You can see the macro mode, also nearly identical, very precise details. But when you do zoom in on this photo, you can see that the Note 9 actually resolves the detail without any blurring of the image. Again, better than the XS Max. Now here is a HDR image that lets us really test the dynamic range of each camera. We have an extremely bright background with some very dark foregrounds here, especially the roof here on the deck. Let's go ahead and take a closer look. You can see quite a bit more detail in the roof on the Note 9, and you still have very similar levels of detail in other areas of the image. I was under the impression that Smart HDR was really going to outperform the Note 9. Overall, in these two photos, the HDR winner is definitely the Note 9, just by a hair. Now here we have a portrait or live focus on the Note 9. The main thing to keep in mind here with live focus with the Note 9, you do not have HDR mode enabled, and the background will blow out very badly. So you can see that happening right here in this photo. The portrait mode is far better on the XS Max this time around. Now here we have another portrait mode photo, and I wouldn't say the edge detection is perfect, especially in this image in particular. You can see bits around the top of my head being blurred out on both of the devices, failing a little bit, but overall it's solid. I think the main issue here is, again, the Note 9 is overexposing my face. Once something's overexposed, it's pure white. There's no getting any additional detail or resolution out of that part of the image anymore, so it's essentially lost. Well, the iPhone XS has much better overall exposure. Now here's a selfie camera portrait comparison. You can see on the XS Max it actually didn't have the best edge detection, especially around my neck. Overall, as an image is concerned, the XS Max is much better exposed because of its front camera HDR capabilities, really keeping that background from blowing out and just turning all white, which is what we see happening in the Note 9. Now the actual image of my face, I would say, is comparable between both of these devices, with the Note 9 maybe being a tiny bit more sharp. Now with this adorable photo of Louis, we have once again the Note 9 upping the exposure a little bit more, and we're getting really close to losing some details here and there around the image, while the iPhone XS Max maintains a more even exposure, not losing any of the detail pretty much anywhere in this image, and that's fantastic. Now as far as the actual image goes, I think the Note 9 is a tad sharper, but the Note 9's image is also very overprocessed. To look at Louis' eyeballs, you can see some noise in Louis' eyeball on the XS Max. You don't really see that same level of noise on the Note 9, and that's because of how processed the image of the Note 9 is to reduce that image and noise, which is good for the amateur photographer out there. But for example, when you look at Louis' nose, the iPhone XS Max maintains the texture of Louis' nose, where the Note 9 thinks, oh, that is just noise in the image, and because it's processing it, you lose that detail. So that's where, if you're manually processing your photos, you're going to get a lot more detail from the XS Max, but if you're a casual photographer, you're going to get better results right out of the box without any post-processing with the Note 9. Another thing you can note here is that the browns are a little bit richer, a little bit more saturated on Louis' face, and that again can be changed by setting the iPhone XS Max to the vivid mode, and you're going to have those colors pop quite a bit more, but the XS Max is just trying to go for more natural looking colors. Now here we have an indoor shot of my living room. You can see my gold play button, and at first glance these images look essentially identical, both in the color and the way the tones are represented in these photos. But when you take a closer look at the gold play button, once again you can see the processing that Samsung does on these photos. Overall, it looks better at first glance on the Note 9, but For example, when you look at the congratulations for surpassing 1 million subscribers, you can see how that processing kind of muffles up the letters and makes it look a little bit janky. It looks a little bit more natural and normal on the iPhone XS Max because of that reduced processing. Here we have a photo of Poseidon, and you can really see where the iPhone XS Max managed to keep Poseidon quite a bit clearer and maintain more detail on his face and around his eyes especially. And once again, we also have better detail around Zeus's eyes and face on the iPhone XS Max. Here's a slow motion at 240 frames per second, 1080p, and I gotta say both devices are looking quite good. They're very, very comparable footage. And now we have 960 frames per second on the right with Note 9. 960 frames per second slow-mo is something that the XS Max just can't do, and I think it's great that the Note 9 has that additional functionality. All right, we are in selfie video mode now, and as you can see, the background is getting blown out really bad. I'm in a pretty dark environment, but one thing I can see right off the bat is that the Note 9 has quite a bit of a wider angle to the selfie mode, which I really like that a lot, actually. That is really, really nice. Another thing I really like about the Note 9's video mode is that it allows for 1440p recording, while the iPhone XS Max only allows for 1080p recording. So this will be really interesting to see the colors and images coming off of these two cameras and seeing how well they work. We'll go ahead and do a walking test to see the video stabilization. I'm kind of stomping my feet a little bit to see how bad it gets. And here we have 4K 30 frames per second stabilized, and it is very comparably stable on both devices. It's really, really well done stabilization all around. I will say that it is handling the exposure of both devices really well in this video scene, so 2 thumbs up there. And now we have 4K 60 frames per second, and you can see that these phones are not nearly as stabilized in 60 frames per second mode, so that's one of the main reasons why I would say just steer clear of 60 frames per second. On top of that, it takes up so much more storage space in your phone. Now, the software on both of these devices is rock solid. It's easy to use, but there are a couple of features that I think are missing on the iPhone XS Max. The first one is, why is the settings for the video record modes in the settings app? That's completely unnatural. It's confusing, and it's just really annoying to have to go through all those extra steps if you want to change the frame rate or bit rate or resolution that you're recording at, and it makes absolutely no sense. Come on, Apple, this needs to change. There needs to at least be a shortcut button in the camera app. The other thing the iPhone XS Max is missing is a Pro mode. The Note 9 does have a Pro mode that allows you to change your shutter speed, your variable aperture from 1.5 to 2.4, your ISO. The great thing about having a Pro mode is it allows you to have a lot more freedom and creativity when you're taking photos. Now you can get a Pro mode on the iPhone by downloading a third-party app, but that is still really annoying. Why is Apple making me download a third-party app to have a Pro mode? I think that's really stupid. The last thing we need to talk about is Beauty Gate. A gate is like whenever there's a massive issue with a phone. Well, when users got the iPhone XS Max home, they realized that there was a lot of processing going into these photos that were kind of beautifying their faces in selfie modes especially. A big part of this is what is powering each of these cameras. Of course, on the iPhone XS Max, we have the A12 Bionic, and the Note 9 has a Snapdragon 845. The A12 Bionic is an incredibly powerful processing unit, and utilizing that power, Apple has leveraged something called tone mapping. Apple's goal here is to HDR your face so that really heavy and strong shadows don't overwhelm your face. Apple is essentially trying to allow for studio-esque lighting even in less than ideal conditions, and the result is that all this processing sometimes beautifies your photos. I don't mind that Apple has included this in their camera app. The thing that bothers me is that you can't turn it off. This is not a setting that you can enable and disable, and that's all I want, Apple. Just give me the option to turn it off and on so that there's less processing, so I can get a more of a rugged photo look, or I can have more of the processing look that you think is ideal, but let me choose. That's kind of where I fall in it. I think the vast majority of users wouldn't even notice it necessarily. They just go, wow, this is a really great selfie. But for those handful of advanced users out there that want to be able to turn it off and on, that are really upset about having this on their device, it can be a deal breaker. I think having a beauty mode or an enhanced processing mode enabled that you can't turn off. So before you decide which phone to get, just keep that in mind that it is there. I think the majority of people won't mind it, but for those of you that will, just steer clear, I guess. Before we get into the conclusion, I just want to tell you that I'm trying to deliver the most unbiased, fair,
honest reviews that I possibly can to you guys. If I'm ever sponsored, I will always be 100% upfront and honest with you guys about that. If you are down for more videos like that, go down and smash that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and then continue on with your smashing and hit that like button. So to wrap things up, the main issues I see with the Note 9 is that it really struggles with overexposing still. You end up losing some detail around the skin and face, and the Samsung devices also is really processing the image, sometimes losing detail that could be there if they didn't process it quite so heavily. But the advantage of that processing is that it reduces the overall amount of noise in most images. So if you're looking to just take photos and post them to social media or whatever you're going to do with them, I think the Note 9 is going to do just a little bit better job right out of the box. When it came to portrait mode, the XS and XS Max really outperformed the Note 9 because they are HDR portrait photos, and that really helps prevent the background from blurring out or overexposing on the face. And so 2 thumbs up for portrait mode on the iPhone XS Max. Neither of the devices are perfect when it comes to edge detection. You're still going to have hairs not being blurred or being becoming part of the background. For example, if the background has very similar color to your hair, it's going to end up either blurring your hair or unblurring the background a little bit, and that can look a little bit odd. Now, as far as low light goes, I think the Note 9 has better low light photos, maintains better colors in that low light, but in video mode, it was very, very similar. So depending on what you're trying to do there, low light may or may not be a big deal. So in conclusion, both cameras are freaking fantastic. Both of them have strengths and weaknesses, but it's really going to come down to how each individual person uses their phone and what they use it for. If you're a portrait camera person, the iPhone XS is just hands down superior because it has HDR. If you're a slow motion camera type person, then the Note 9 wins because it has a higher frame rate. If you're a video type person, you'll be happy with both of these. If I had to choose between these two devices just for their camera, I think I would pick the Note 9. Just me personally, I don't take that many selfie photos very often. The occasional selfie focus mode is really handy. Like I took a couple with Carla the other day. So maybe I would take the iPhone XS Max. It's so hard to say. I don't even know. I can't make the decision. Which of these two phones would you pick? Take the poll in the top right. Let me know down in the comments. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Brandon out.